Good evening. Tonight, let your mind drift into a slower rhythm. We'll wander back to a time when night itself was something to be feared, not for what could be seen, but for what couldn't. As you listen, you might feel your body soften, your thoughts begin to quiet, and the gentle sound of a fire somewhere in the distance wrapping around you like warmth. You are safe here, just breathe. This story will take you through the old world, one sleepy step at a time. Before we begin, I wonder, from which country are you listening tonight? And what time is it where you are? Is it past midnight, or just the soft edge of evening? Before we go further, if you enjoy calm history told like this, you can gently press the like and subscribe button. No rush. Maybe do it later, after you've drifted away into sleep. Now, let's return to the beginning, to a world before electricity, when night meant true darkness. People would finish their work as the sun dipped below the trees, knowing that once it was gone, so too was their sense of safety. The world outside became silent, except for the sound of animals, wind, and the creak of wooden walls. There was a time when people believed that the night carried weight, a quiet pressure that settled over homes and hearts. They didn't think of it as emptiness, but as something alive. Every shadow seemed to breathe. Every whisper of wind might be something more. Inside small cottages, the air grew still. A single candle might flicker on a table, its light bending with each breath of the night. Families gathered close, talking softly, their words swallowed by the dark corners of the room. For many, this was not just the time to rest, it was the time to be careful. The night was unpredictable. There were no glowing windows across the field, no hum of engines, no distant laughter to remind you that others were awake. Only silence and the endless black stretching beyond the door. It's in this silence that the mind begins to wander. You might imagine what it felt like, lying on a straw bed, wrapped in wool blankets, listening to the wind move through cracks in the wall. The wooden beams above creak softly, the fire has burned low, and every sound feels amplified. Your thoughts drift between waking and dreaming, and you can't help but wonder, what truly happens when we sleep? Too many, sleep was a mystery, a crossing between worlds. One moment you were awake and aware, and the next, gone somewhere else entirely. They didn't know about brainwaves or REM cycles. They only knew that sometimes people woke frightened, claiming they had seen things that felt too real to be dreams. If you start to feel your eyes grow heavier, that's perfectly fine. You're safe to drift. The story will keep moving gently, like the rhythm of breathing. In those early centuries, people feared what might visit them in their sleep. Not monsters, but sensations, the sudden pressure on the chest, the weight of something unseen, the air too thick to breathe. These moments were real to them. They left marks on the memory, even when morning light arrived. The old world was quieter, but not peaceful. Silence made imagination stronger. And when imagination is the only way to explain fear, it can shape entire beliefs. Some nights, even the bravest souls hesitated to close their eyes. They would listen to the faint hoot of an owl, to the distant snap of a branch, and feel their pulse quicken. In that stillness, the line between the real and the imagined became very thin. If you're still awake, let the sound of my voice remind you that you are in the present, not the past. You are safe, warm, and breathing slowly. Let's continue gently through the night of another age. People often described the night as having moods. It could be calm, or restless, or heavy. They said that some nights felt as if the air itself was watching, waiting. So, before lying down, many whispered small words of comfort, or checked the locks twice, just to be sure. The darkness was not just the absence of light, it was an experience. It had texture, it had presence, and when sleep came, it wasn't seen as rest, but as surrender, a letting go of control, trusting that the night would pass without harm. Those who lived in this quiet world carried a deep respect for the unseen, not out of worship, but out of caution, a recognition that they didn't fully understand what the human mind could conjure. In their world, the line between thought and reality was often blurred by fear, by loneliness, and by the vastness of the night. As your breathing slows, let your body feel as still as those ancient cottages must have felt. This story will stay gentle. The night is only as heavy as we imagine it to be. In the deep hours of night, when even the fire has turned to embers, the air feels thicker. Sleepers shift on their straw beds, half between dream and waking, unsure which world they belong to. If a sound creaks, they wonder if it's the house settling, or something outside moving softly through the dark. The imagination fills in what the eyes can't see, and sometimes it feels almost alive. For those who lived centuries ago, fear of the night wasn't foolish, it was survival. Night meant danger, the unseen, the unknown, the possibility that something might change before morning. They didn't have alarms or lanterns ready at a switch. They had only instinct and prayer for protection from harm. It's said that people would sometimes sleep in pairs, or with family close, just to feel the warmth of another heartbeat. The human need for comfort runs deep, to know that someone nearby is breathing the same slow rhythm of sleep. And in that shared silence, they found peace strong enough to face the dark again the next night. If you notice the stillness around you now, let it comfort you instead of unsettle you. Unlike them, your night is safe, soft, and wrapped in familiar sounds. When dawn finally began to show, the first grey light creeping through the window, the fear dissolved like mist. The same trees that looked menacing at night turned gentle in daylight. The world always returned unchanged, reminding them that fear fades, but the memory of it lingers. They would talk about their dreams at breakfast, describing them with curiosity instead of panic. Maybe someone dreamed of wandering through fog, another of voices whispering. Over time, these stories became lessons, quiet records of how deeply human minds could create entire worlds while resting. The weight of the night, as they called it, wasn't just fear, it was also a kind of wonder, an awareness that the mind itself is vast, mysterious, and full of unseen corners. Even without understanding the science of sleep, they somehow sensed that rest was powerful, a gift that the Almighty allowed to heal and to quiet the soul. You can feel that same permission now, to rest, to let go, to trust that this moment of stillness is meant for peace. As centuries passed, the fear of night slowly turned into fascination. Writers and thinkers began to describe darkness not as a threat, but as a mirror for thought. The night became the setting for reflection, for art, for imagination, no longer a space of terror, but of creation. Yet, even now, a part of that ancient feeling remains. When the lights go out and silence settles, the same instinct stirs, a reminder of how deeply we are connected to those who came before. We still listen to the quiet, we still dream, and we still wonder what truly lies within the mind's own shadows. The old world teaches us something simple, that peace doesn't come from chasing light, but from learning to rest in the dark. The people who feared the night learned, in time, that it passes, always, and every sunrise feels like a quiet promise that no fear lasts forever. If you're still listening, let your body melt a little deeper into rest. There's no need to think, or even to follow the story now. You're safe, you're warm, and everything can wait until morning. Somewhere in the past, a candle flickers its final flame, and another night fades quietly into memory. That same calm watches over you now. The rhythm of breath, the hush of the room, the steady pulse of life continuing. Close your eyes. Let the night become soft again. No resolution is needed. Just this moment, quiet, timeless, simple. You are resting within history itself. And history, tonight, is finally at peace. Long ago, people didn't think of dreams as stories of the mind. They believed dreams were movements of something unseen, shadows that slipped quietly into sleep, bringing visions that felt as real as waking life. When someone awoke trembling, their heart pounding in the still dark, they didn't call it a nightmare yet. They simply said, "Something visited me in my sleep." The human mind has always tried to explain what it doesn't understand. When breath catches in the chest, when the body cannot move for a moment after waking, it feels too physical to be imagined. People long ago thought of this as proof that something beyond their control could cross the boundary between dream and waking. The unseen world, they thought, could press down, whisper, and vanish before dawn. Across different lands and languages, the same experiences were described again and again. A presence at the edge of the bed, a heavy weight on the chest, a struggle to speak or breathe, though nothing visible was there. It didn't matter where you lived, these moments seemed universal, shared across humankind. When people spoke of such nights, they often described the fear more vividly than the image itself. The darkness around them felt thick, the air unmoving. Every heartbeat echoed like a drum in the quiet, and when at last they could move, they lit a candle, looking into corners, half expecting to find something that wasn't there. If you've ever woken from a dream and needed a moment to know where you are, that small confusion is a thread of the same feeling they once knew. It's the fragile bridge between what's imagined and what's real. For those who lived centuries ago, dreams were not just thoughts, they were messages, mysteries, or warnings carried through sleep. A restless night might mean more than a busy mind. It might be the world trying to speak in symbols, in emotions, in scenes that defied reason. And in that mystery, fear found its place. Imagine lying in total darkness, no glow of city lights, only the faint flicker of firelight reflecting on the ceiling. You dream of falling or of being watched, and when your eyes open, the feeling still clings to you. That lingering unease, they took it as evidence that something real had brushed against them in sleep. Even the most rational minds of the time couldn't quite dismiss the sensation. They had no words for brain chemistry or muscle paralysis, so instead, they spoke of visitations, of dreams that crossed into the physical world, not entirely illusion, not entirely real. Let the thought of it drift by like smoke. You're only observing the way people once tried to make sense of the unseen, not to believe what they did, but to understand how they felt. Sometimes people would blame sleeplessness on bad air, or strange weather, or even on the position of the moon, but the common belief remained that the night had its own power, and the dream was its messenger. And so they feared not only what they saw, but what their own minds might reveal when the world went dark. When morning came, few people spoke of their dreams easily. There was a quiet hesitation, as if saying it aloud might call the shadow back again. So, some chose silence, keeping their uneasy nights folded away like secrets between the mind and the pillow. Dreams, they believed, had power when remembered too clearly. Others tried to explain them, turning to stories passed through generations. One person's dream became a tale of caution, another's became a mystery shared around the firelight, and slowly, these whispered experiences wove themselves into the fabric of folklore, not superstition, but shared memory. The more people described their dreams, the more patterns they began to see. Dreams of falling, of running but never moving, of hearing footsteps that weren't there. Across centuries, these same images reappeared in every village, every home, every night. It was as if the human mind carried its own universal language of fear and wonder. If you feel your breath slowing, that's all right, you're meant to. Let the story flow gently, as if each word were part of your own dream drifting through time. In the candlelit rooms of the past, those who studied sleep were few, but their curiosity was endless. They kept journals by their beds, noting the strange images that passed through their minds. To them, each dream was a message waiting to be understood, a small bridge between thought and mystery. Even in fear, there was fascination. The term nightmare began to take shape during these centuries. It no longer meant just a bad dream, but something that pressed upon the sleeper, real, heavy, physical. A weight that arrived with the dark and disappeared with the dawn. They didn't yet know it was the body's own reaction. They only knew that it felt alive. Some thought dreams could travel, shared between people who slept at the same hour. If two friends dreamed of the same thing, they believed their minds had touched across distance. This, too, gave dreams a deeper importance, not just illusions, but connections unseen. And so the boundary between shadow and soul grew thinner in their stories. If your eyes are heavy now, you can rest with them. The story will continue softly, steady and slow. No need to listen closely, just let it surround you. As centuries passed, people began to name these nighttime experiences more carefully. They realized that the fear came not from outside, but from within, from memory, from worry, from the way the mind echoes its own thoughts. But even then, understanding did not erase the feeling. Nightmares still came, still felt real, still reminded them of how small and fragile sleep could be. By morning, the world was ordinary again, the same fields, the same streets, the same sky. Yet something lingered from the night, something unspoken, like the scent of smoke after a fire fades. Perhaps that's what dreams have always been, reminders that even in rest, the human heart continues to feel, to remember, to imagine. And so, when dreams became shadows, they also became stories, the first whispers of how people learned to live with fear by giving it a shape. In the end, what they feared most was not the dream itself, but the silence after waking, that pause before the world returns, when the mind still half believes in what it saw. If you're still awake, breathe once more, deeply, slowly. You're safe here, listening to echoes of the past that once frightened others, but now only help us drift into calm. The night will always carry its shadows, but now we know they are only reflections, fragile and fleeting, like mist under morning light. And as you rest, you share in that same quiet truth, that even the darkest dream fades gently, as all nights do. In the long history of sleep, few ideas traveled as far and lasted as long as the story of the Mare of the Night. It was not a horse, as the word might suggest today, but a name for something unseen, a presence that pressed down on sleepers, holding them still between dream and waking. Across many lands, people described it in the same way, a heavy feeling, a weight upon the chest, a sense of being watched when no one was there. It was fear made physical. Imagine lying on your back in a silent room, your eyes half open but your body unable to move. The air feels thicker, your heart beat louder. You try to call out, but your voice will not rise. That was the nightmare, not a creature to be seen, but an experience to be endured. In the quiet villages of the past, people didn't have the words for sleep paralysis. They only knew that something strange visited in the dark. For some, it felt like punishment. For others, like a wandering spirit pressing curiosity upon the living. But for most, it was simply terror, one that returned again and again. When morning came, they would speak softly of it, afraid to describe too much. They said that naming it might call it back, that even talking about the mare could tempt it to return. So stories grew instead, not as confessions, but as warnings shared by the firelight. And through those stories, the mare found a place in every corner of human sleep. If you've ever felt your body frozen as you woke, you've touched the same mystery, not danger, just the mind between two worlds. Let that thought drift away, and let your breathing stay calm. Some tales spoke of the mare moving from house to house, searching for sleepers whose doors were left open. It could pass through walls, they said, or ride the wind like mist. Others believed it followed those who spoke too often of their dreams. Fear, after all, travels fastest through imagination. In many places, people tried to protect themselves from it. They placed small charms near the bed, or turned pillows a certain way before lying down. Some believed that sleeping on one side prevented the mare from sitting upon the chest. These rituals, quiet and harmless, were acts of comfort, tiny defenses against the unknown. In truth, they were doing what humans have always done, turning fear into ritual and ritual into rest. Even the smallest gesture before sleep could bring peace of mind, helping them surrender to the night again. Because sometimes, the act of believing in safety is what allows rest to return. If you start to feel drowsy, that's the right time to let go of the story a little. You don't have to follow every word. The rhythm alone will carry you gently. Those who lived centuries ago saw no contradiction in fearing and respecting the night. They accepted it as part of life, that light and dark each held their own mysteries. So when the mare came, they did not fight it. They simply waited for morning, trusting that daylight would free them again. And in every retelling, in every generation, the mare became less of a monster and more of a symbol, a reflection of how fragile sleep can be, and how easily the human mind can turn stillness into story. As the stories spread, the mare changed shape depending on who told it. In one village, it was said to be a drifting shadow that slipped through cracks in the wall. In another, it was nothing more than heavy air, settling over sleepers when their hearts were uneasy. The details never mattered as much as the feeling, that weight, that helplessness, that strange pause between fear and awakening. People began to notice that it came most often when someone was exhausted, lonely, or burdened by worry. The mare seemed to follow sadness more than sin, so the elders advised gentle habits before sleep, a quiet mind, a calm heart, a small prayer for peace. And often, that alone was enough to keep the night light and undisturbed. In that way, the mare became less of a curse and more of a teacher. It reminded people that rest was delicate, that the human body and mind needed care. If one slept with too much on their mind, the night could feel heavier than it truly was. It was not punishment, only a reflection of the self. Let that idea rest in your thoughts for a moment, that peace, even now, begins within. The quieter the heart becomes, the gentler the night feels around it. By the later centuries, some scholars began to write about this experience. They recorded how people awoke unable to move, feeling pressure on their chest. Slowly, the idea of a spirit began to fade, replaced by the first glimmers of understanding that it was the body itself, caught between dreaming and waking. Science began to whisper answers to the ancient fears, but even when people understood, the Mare remained in language, in poetry, in memory. It was no longer something to fear, but something to name the feeling that everyone still knew. To this day, when we say nightmare, we are echoing that old belief that something dark once sat beside us as we slept. If you are half awake, let that word feel harmless now. It's just history breathing softly, nothing more. In truth, the Mare was never real in the way people once thought. It was a story for an experience that felt too real to ignore, and maybe that's what makes it powerful still. It's a reminder of how human we are, how deeply we feel even in silence. Sleep, after all, is not a surrender to danger, but to trust, the trust that the night will pass peacefully. The people of the past learned that the fear faded when they accepted it. They lit their candles, whispered their hopes for morning, and closed their eyes again. The world did not change, but their courage did. And each dawn reminded them that fear, like a shadow, cannot survive the light. As you listen, let your breath slow to the rhythm of theirs, long in and out. There's nothing waiting in the dark but the quiet itself. And so, the story of the Mare became less about the creature and more about the comfort of waking. That small, grateful breath when you realize you are safe. That moment when dream fades and the world returns in gentle color. It is not terror, it is simply being human. Now, centuries later, the Mare lingers only as a word, a faint echo of a time when sleep felt mysterious and sacred. It reminds us that fear, too, can soften, that even the darkest stories eventually become whispers for rest. And tonight, as you close your eyes, that same truth remains. The night may be deep, but it is kind to those who trust its silence. In the old world, the home was more than shelter, it was protection from the night itself. When the sun dipped below the horizon, families retreated indoors as if crossing into a different realm. The doors were barred, the shutters closed tight, and even the smallest gaps were checked for drafts. The world outside was full of sounds that the imagination could not name: the sigh of trees, the distant cry of animals, the creak of wood settling in the cold. To those who lived centuries ago, these noises carried meaning. Every gust of wind or scrape at the door might be something unknown. So, they made their homes into small fortresses of comfort, where warmth, light, and closeness kept the darkness at bay. Safety wasn't only about strong walls, but about routine, small rituals that reminded the heart that night could still be gentle. Inside those houses, the evening followed a careful rhythm. Fires were stoked one last time, their glow flickering on low ceilings of timber and straw. Children were hushed to sleep with quiet stories, while the eldest of the home ensured that the embers would last until morning. The faint smell of smoke clung to the air, mixing with the sweetness of drying herbs that hung above the hearth. Each home had its own way of preparing for rest. Some kept a candle burning faintly through the night, not for light, but for peace of mind. Others placed iron objects by the door, believing that certain metals carried protection by the will of the Almighty who gives benefit through all means. It was not superstition, but comfort, a way of feeling watched over when the world grew too still. You might imagine that same warmth now, a quiet room, a single flame, the air humming softly with safety. Even across centuries, the feeling of home is unchanged. The layout of these homes was simple but thoughtful. A single large room often served every purpose: cooking, talking, sleeping, and dreaming. Beds of straw and wool were arranged close together so that heat from one body could reach another. In winter, the walls might tremble under the wind, yet inside it was all tenderness and care. A mother might hum softly while folding linens, her song blending with the crackle of the fire. A father might check the latch once more before lying down, the quiet click of the wood marking the end of the day. And beyond those walls, the night continued its watch, wide, cold, and endless, but unable to enter. The home was the boundary between fear and peace. There was something sacred in these nightly routines, not in the sense of worship, but in gratitude, a rhythm of care passed down through generations. Before sleep, some families would share warm milk or water with herbs, soothing the body after long hours of labor. They didn't have science to explain calmness or melatonin. They only knew that warmth eased the mind. These were gestures of stillness, washing the hands, straightening the blankets, whispering kind words before silence returned. Each movement was slow and deliberate, as if speaking to the night without words. We are safe. We are home. In that peace, sleep came naturally, soft as candlelight. The flicker of a small flame could transform a room entirely. Shadows danced on the walls, shifting gently with each movement of air. Children sometimes watched them, tracing their shapes like animals or faces. The line between dream and waking began even before the eyes closed. Those who lived long ago understood this unspoken truth, that light, even the smallest one, could remind the heart of warmth and mercy. And so they kept it near, not to banish darkness, but to coexist with it. It was a quiet partnership, the light of humankind and the vast, patient night beyond. If you imagine the glow of that single flame, let it steady your breath. You are safe where you are, as they once were, surrounded by quiet walls of rest. Some nights were colder than others, and the sounds of the wind could feel almost human, sighing, whispering, calling. To ease the fear, people turned to familiar comforts: the scent of wood smoke, the sound of a dog shifting near the door, the soft rustle of hay. These were the details that built their sense of security, the anchors against the invisible. They didn't chase away the darkness, they learned to live beside it, and in that balance, they found calm. Every night ended not with fear, but acceptance. The night would always come, but so too would morning. Even now, that rhythm remains. Night falls, silence deepens, the world softens, and in the middle of it all, the small human habit of finding peace before sleep continues, as it always has. As the last flames dimmed, the house took on a quieter tone. The crackling of wood turned into a soft hiss, and the faint glow from the hearth began to fade into amber embers. This was the hour when even the wind seemed to rest. The smell of smoke hung in the air, a scent of life, warmth, and the simple comfort of having made it through another day. Each creak of timber, each sigh of the floorboards was familiar, almost soothing. The sounds were reminders that the house was alive in its own quiet way, protecting those inside from the cold beyond its walls. Outside, frost began to bloom on the windows, tracing delicate lines like veins of ice. Inside, everything slowed. Even time itself seemed to pause, waiting for sleep to settle fully into the room. In the soft dark, the fire's glow painted the ceiling with gentle waves of light. Shadows curled around beams, folding over walls, shifting with every breath of the sleepers. These were moments when the mind began to drift between waking and dreaming. There was no rush, no urgency, only the rhythm of calm breathing filling the quiet air. People in that era didn't see sleep as escape. It was restoration, a trust that the night would pass as it always did. And though they feared what might linger in darkness, they also respected it, knowing that rest was a gift that came from faith, rhythm, and routine. It was a fragile peace, but one they built with their own hands each night. If you close your eyes now, you might feel that same peace, the quiet courage of trusting the night to care for you until morning. Sometimes the stillness was broken by the smallest sound, the settling of ashes, the faint rustle of an animal outside. No one stirred. The sounds were part of the music of the night, as ordinary and harmless as the ticking of a heart. In this shared silence, every soul in the home became part of something larger, a hush that stretched beyond walls and fields, beyond the reach of light. The world felt enormous, and yet, somehow, close. They had no need for noise or company. Peace itself was enough. Sleep arrived like fog over water, slowly, softly, until everything disappeared into stillness. Some families believed that a peaceful home created peaceful dreams. So before sleeping, they cleared their thoughts as carefully as they swept their floors. Worries were set aside for morning, just as tools were hung on their pegs. The mind, like the house, needed order to rest. This wasn't science, it was simple wisdom, learned by living close to the rhythms of nature. The night was not an enemy to be fought, but a time to surrender control. And in that surrender, calmness deepened, both in body and in heart. For those who trusted the quiet, sleep always came gently. As your breath slows, let the same idea settle in you. Calm doesn't have to be forced. It grows naturally, like dawn finding its way through clouds. Sometimes, children woke in the night and whispered that they had dreamed of storms or strange noises. The parents would murmur softly, half asleep, telling them to listen instead, to the wind, to the crackle, to the quiet itself. They taught them not to fear what could not be seen, but to rest within it. That was the greatest lesson passed through time. That peace is not the absence of darkness, but the ability to rest inside it. Even centuries later, that truth remains unchanged. It's what keeps us closing our eyes each night, trusting that we'll wake again with light. Outside, the moon climbed higher, spilling pale light through the cracks of the shutters. The fields glimmered with frost, untouched and still. Inside, the sleepers breathed in harmony, a rhythm as old as humankind itself. There was no noise, no thought, no fear left to name, only the quiet pulse of life moving through another night. It's easy to imagine that same silence now, stretching across centuries, whispering softly that the night has always been kind to those who rest in it. Breathe. The same calm that filled those ancient homes now fills your room. It asks for nothing, only that you stay still long enough to feel it. And so, in the houses built for sleep and safety, fear found its boundaries, and peace found its shape. The walls did not just guard the body, they guarded the heart, keeping its rhythm steady through the long, patient hours until dawn. When morning came, light returned like a quiet promise. The warmth of the fire was gone, but the memory of rest remained. And each night after, they rebuilt it again, a ritual, a rhythm, a small act of faith in the gentleness of the dark. A faith that, even now, keeps the world sleeping soundly. While most slept beneath wool and firelight, a few stayed awake, the watchers of the night. In every village, there were always some who volunteered, or were chosen, to remain awake while others dreamed. They kept the fires alive, guarded the animals, and listened for the faintest signs of danger. But their duty wasn't only protection from thieves or wild creatures. It was something quieter, almost spiritual in its patience. They were there to hold the silence, to keep the rhythm of wakefulness steady so the rest could surrender to sleep. Under the open sky or beside dim embers, these watchers lived in the slowest hours of existence. Their thoughts wandered as the stars drifted overhead, and the world around them seemed to breathe in unison. They watched, not for fear, but for peace, guardians of stillness until the first light of dawn. The air at night was different. It carried the chill of dew and the scent of smoke from distant chimneys. Each sound became magnified: the soft rustle of an animal, the crack of a twig, the whisper of grass swaying in the wind. The watchers knew these sounds by heart. They could tell the difference between danger and ordinary life in an instant. A fox in the haystack, a bird shifting in its nest, all familiar companions of the quiet hours. And though they stood alone, they didn't feel lonely. There was comfort in the vastness, in knowing that their small circle of firelight was enough to hold the night at bay. Every breath they took seemed shared with the world around them. Imagine standing in that quiet, the chill air on your skin, the slow rhythm of your breathing. Even without movement, everything feels alive. The watchers were not soldiers or heroes. They were often shepherds, older men or young boys trusted to keep an eye on the dark. Some prayed softly to pass the time, asking the Almighty to protect those who slept nearby. Others simply listened to the hum of the earth, the crackle of the fire, the distant rhythm of the stream. Their role was simple, yet deeply human: to stay awake so others could rest without fear. And in that quiet service, they became something rare: witnesses to the most peaceful hours of the world. The night was their companion, not their enemy. And when dawn broke, they greeted it like an old friend. It's said that those who kept watch learned to read the night like a book. They could tell the time by the stars, by the angle of the moon, by the shift in the air before sunrise. They noticed patterns others missed: how animals stirred moments before dawn, how silence deepened just before the first bird sang. The night, to them, was not emptiness. It was rhythm, memory, and breath. Each sound told a story. Each shadow marked the turning of time. By listening, they learned a kind of patience that only darkness could teach. And through that patience, fear lost its place. The watchers' fires were small, just enough to keep the cold away, never enough to invite attention. They would sit close, warming their hands, feeding the embers slowly to stretch their glow until morning. The fire became more than heat. It was a companion, silent, steady, alive. They spoke to it, sometimes, whispering thoughts that no one else would ever hear. Because in the deep of night, even the quietest spark could feel like company. It flickered, listening, and answered in its own language of light. There, alone but unafraid, the watchers found a kind of calm that only solitude could offer. If your body is beginning to relax, let it. You're in the company of centuries of watchers, people who learned that stillness is a kind of strength. When clouds covered the moon, the world turned to complete darkness. The eyes adjusted, the ears took over. Every movement became part of a wider awareness: the rustle of trees, the shift of the wind, the soft rhythm of your own heartbeat. For those who stayed awake, this was not frightening. It was mesmerizing. The night wasn't empty. It was full of invisible motion, subtle life, and deep silence. To stay awake in it was to know the world at its slowest and most honest pace. A moment stretched into eternity, and the mind grew quiet. In those hours, thoughts often drifted toward reflection. The watchers thought about their families, their lives, the fields they would work again in daylight. The quiet became a mirror. The worries that felt large in the day shrank beneath the stars. The night reminded them of their smallness, and strangely, that smallness brought peace. There was humility in watching the sky and realizing that the same moon had watched every generation before. It was continuity, the kind that softens even the hardest hearts. If you look up at the night sky in your mind, imagine that same moon shining on them centuries ago. Nothing has changed. Only the watchers and the world have taken turns resting. The night watchers passed the time not in fear, but in rhythm. They walked slow circles, stirred the fire, or hummed under their breath. Sometimes they nodded off for a few seconds, waking again to check the horizon. There was patience in their stillness, trust in their task. They knew that no matter how long the dark lasted, the light always returned. And that was enough to keep watching, breathing, and waiting for the faint gold line of dawn to appear again. As the hours deepened, the world grew even quieter. The last echoes of distant movement faded until only the soft hiss of wind remained. The watchers leaned against wooden posts or stones, their eyes half-lidded but alert. Sometimes they whispered to themselves, not out of loneliness, but to keep their thoughts awake. The rhythm of their voice matched the sway of the trees, the flicker of fire, the steady pulse of time. In those moments, they existed between wakefulness and dream, guardians of silence. The night accepted them completely, not as intruders, but as part of its stillness. Each breath became prayer, each heartbeat an act of faith in the promise of dawn. They knew that light would come, as it always did, and so they waited without fear. The longer one stayed awake, the more the senses sharpened. Every detail became vivid. The glint of frost on grass, the whisper of a stream beneath the hill, the stars above seemed endless, so close that one could almost touch them. Some watchers swore they could hear the earth itself breathing, slow and deep beneath their feet. In those hours, solitude transformed into something peaceful, almost sacred. They no longer guarded against danger. They simply kept company with the world as it turned. The night was not heavy anymore. It was patient, kind, and infinite. Their task was no longer duty, it was belonging. If you listen now, you might feel that same belonging, the comfort of being small beneath something vast, and being safe within it. When the cold bit harder, they pulled their cloaks tighter and stepped closer to the fading embers. The warmth was faint but constant, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. The fire spoke in tiny cracks and sighs, a quiet rhythm that lulled even the alert mind toward drowsiness. Sometimes they would close their eyes for only a breath, letting the darkness move around them like water. Even then, they felt the world turning gently, slow, steady, without hurry. And in that awareness, they understood something simple. The night didn't need to be conquered. It only needed to be witnessed, and so they watched, faithfully, without fear. As the horizon began to pale, the sky softened from black to deep blue. The air felt lighter, almost tender. The first bird's call broke the silence, hesitant, then sure, then answered by another. The watchers smiled faintly. Their long hours were ending. The hardest part of the night was always just before dawn, when time felt suspended and warmth seemed far away. But then light always returned, as gentle as forgiveness. It poured over fields, touched the roofs of sleeping homes, and turned the frost to silver. The world awoke, and the watcher's task was done. You can feel that same slow return now, a faint glow behind your eyelids, the promise of morning in the distance. Rest comes the same way light does, quietly, without needing to be called. When the sun rose, the watchers didn't rush home. They lingered for a moment, watching how the light crept across the land they had guarded. Every detail looked new again, the mist lifting from the grass, the outlines of trees glowing gold. It was as if the night had been a dream, and daylight was its gentle awakening. Some said that those who kept watch learned to appreciate morning more than anyone else, because they had seen the contrast, the weight of darkness, and the relief of light. It made them humble and strangely joyful. In every sunrise, they found renewal. As the rest of the village stirred awake, the watchers quietly stepped away. They said little of their night. There was nothing dramatic to tell, but their silence carried peace, the kind that only comes from being alone with the world when it's most quiet. They slept later that morning, their dreams light, their minds unburdened, and though few ever thanked them, their presence had mattered. For in every home, families had slept safely beneath the watchful calm of another's eyes. And perhaps that is why sleep feels so sacred, because someone, somewhere, once stayed awake for us. If you're still listening, let your breathing match theirs, slow, content, and full of peace. The watchers have rested now, and so can you. The night continues, as it always has. There will always be watchers, and there will always be those who sleep. The two balance each other like day and night, silence and song, fear and comfort. It is a rhythm as old as time, unbroken even by centuries. And as you rest, you become part of that same rhythm, safe, still, and deeply human. The fire fades, the stars retreat, and the story folds into quiet once more. The world, for now, is at peace. In the quiet centuries before modern medicine and electric light, people learned to shape their nights through small, peaceful rituals. Before sleeping, they would tend to the air, the fire, and the body, believing that rest came easiest to those who prepared gently for it. Homes were simple, but the care people gave to rest was deep. They knew that calm could be invited, the way one welcomes a guest. The act of sleeping was not taken for granted. It was treated with respect, as if night itself were a living companion that deserved patience and grace. And so, every evening began the same way, soft voices, slow movements, and scents that filled the air with quiet comfort. Even now, you might feel something familiar in that the way peace often begins with the smallest of actions. They understood the air mattered. Before lying down, families opened small shutters or doors, letting the cool night drift through the room. Fresh air, they believed, carried away heaviness, the kind that made both the mind and body uneasy. In winter, the air was sharp and clean, brushing against candlelight and stirring the faint scent of wood smoke. In summer, it smelled of grass and dew. That brief exchange between indoors and outdoors felt like renewal, a reminder that the home breathed too. The night air was not feared here. It was part of the ritual, a gift from the Almighty who made both warmth and wind to bring balance to rest. You might imagine that moment now, a small window open, a sigh of air cooling the room, the promise of rest near. The scent of herbs played a quiet role in every household. Bundles of lavender, rosemary, mint, or dried chamomile hung from beams and rafters. They believed these plants had gentle properties, that their fragrance could settle the heart and guard the sleeper from unease. But beyond belief, there was truth, the calming power of scent, the comfort of familiarity. When the air grew warm, the aroma spread through the room like a soft song. Children drifted to sleep beneath it, their dreams colored by the natural sweetness in the air. It wasn't magic. It was habit, rhythm, and gratitude. In their way, they thanked the earth for what it gave, and the Creator for allowing such peace to exist in the simplest of things. There was tenderness in how they prepared their beds. Sheets were smoothed, straw was fluffed, and blankets were shaken out with care. Every motion had meaning. It wasn't about perfection, it was about readiness, the calm that comes from tending to one's own comfort. A well-made bed was a small act of love, both for oneself and for those who shared the space. And when, at last, they lay down, the body recognized the signal. It is time to rest now. The heart slowed. The mind released its hold on the day. The room, filled with gentle air and familiar scents, became a world unto itself, safe, silent, and soft as prayer. The fire by the hearth burned low but steady. No longer fierce, its light became kind, flickering, golden, and slow. It painted moving shapes on the walls, turning the room into a quiet dance of shadow and warmth. Many believed the fire should never be fully extinguished before sleep. It was a guardian of the night, both practical and symbolic, a reminder that light still lived somewhere within the darkness. And in truth, it was more than belief. That faint glow kept the chill away, kept the air dry, and gave comfort to every heart that feared the emptiness of black night. It was a language of peace that needed no words. Even now, a single light, a candle, a lamp, or the flicker of a screen can offer the same gentle reassurance, not to chase away darkness, but to soften it. Some nights, mothers would prepare small satchels filled with herbs and hang them near the beds of children. They called them sleep bundles. Inside were lavender, chamomile, or crushed mint, chosen not for superstition, but for calmness. The soft fragrance lingered through the night, steady and kind. When a child stirred or whimpered, the scent met them like an embrace. It reminded them of home, of safety, of warmth, and in that comfort, sleep returned without effort. For adults, too, scent and air became the invisible bridge between waking and rest, proof that peace could be felt even in darkness. As the night grew deeper, silence filled the rooms completely. The herbs above the hearth swayed gently in unseen air. The fire whispered its last few sounds, the wood giving off a faint glow. Outside the world was still. Only the far-off sound of an owl or the rustle of leaves broke the quiet. Inside, everything was perfect in its stillness. The work of the day was done, and so was the work of preparing for rest. Every sense had been softened, every thought stilled. It was in these moments that true sleep, deep, natural, merciful, would finally arrive. You might let your own breath slow with theirs now. Let calmness spread through your body, like those scents once filled the air, slow, subtle, and endlessly kind. As the hours drifted deeper into night, peace became almost tangible. The air was cool but gentle, carrying faint notes of mint and smoke. Those who still stirred spoke softly, careful not to disturb the calm they had created. It was as if the entire house breathed in rhythm, its walls and beams settling into the same slow pulse as the sleepers. Outside, the sky stretched wide and silent, scattered with the faint shimmer of stars. Inside, warmth lingered, wrapping around them like a woven blanket of scent and air. This was not luxury, it was survival turned into serenity. They didn't need wealth for peace. They built it each night with intention, patience, and care. In that simplicity, they found the kind of calm that modern life often forgets. For them, sleep was not just a physical need, but a form of trust. Each night, they lay down without knowing what dreams might come or how the weather might change. And yet, they rested, believing that the same mercy that guided the sun to rise would guard their slumber too. They didn't understand science or sleep cycles. They understood surrender. To close one's eyes was to admit that the world could continue without them for a while, and somehow that thought brought comfort. The night, after all, belonged to everyone, even those who could not see it through closed eyes. It was a shared stillness, a universal pause across humanity. You might feel that same pause now, the body loosening, the heart quieting, the world fading just enough to feel distant. Some believed that keeping herbs near the bed could carry blessings through the night, not as superstition, but as gratitude, an acknowledgement that the earth itself, created with purpose, offered its gentlest medicines freely. They understood that calmness could be cultivated, that peace wasn't random but built with small choices. To prepare, the air, the bed, the light, it was a language of patience and care. Every scent carried memory: mint for cool mornings, lavender for soft afternoons, rosemary for protection and strength. In time, these scents became part of the rhythm of life itself, the smell of rest, the scent of safety. And when the first hint of dawn touched the windows, those scents lingered like blessings left behind. Sometimes, even after the fire burned out, the faintest aroma of herbs remained. It mixed with morning air, drifting through cracks and fading as light returned. To those who woke early, that scent was like proof that the night had been kind. It meant the air had done its work, cleansing, soothing, carrying peace through unseen hands. And while they didn't use words like mindfulness or restoration, they practiced both, quietly and naturally. Their calm was intentional. Their nights were crafted gently, as if each moment before sleep was a prayer in motion. By honoring the process of rest, they honored life itself. If you listen carefully, you might notice that same calm in your room, the stillness that sits just beyond sound, waiting for you to notice it. As centuries passed, the rituals changed, but the feeling never did. Even now, we light candles, make tea, adjust pillows, and breathe deeper, all echoes of those early habits. We still invite sleep the same way they did, slowly, kindly, without demand. Every gesture, the click of a lamp, the coolness of night air through an open window, carries a piece of that history. It is proof that peace is not invented, it is remembered. It's built through repetition, through trust, through the simple act of preparing for rest. Each time we do it, we repeat what generations once did beneath the same sky. And somewhere in that rhythm, calmness finds us again. When the last candle finally dimmed, darkness returned, but not as an enemy. It was soft, familiar, and full of comfort. The scent of herbs still lingered faintly, like a quiet promise that rest would come. The wind outside whispered through the shutters, and the world felt endlessly patient. Within that stillness, hearts slowed, and breathing deepened. Sleep, steady and quiet, arrived like an old friend. It was neither forced nor chased. It simply came, as it always had, to those who welcomed it with care. And so the night, filled with scent and silence, closed gently around them. The world rested, and the story of rest itself continued, unbroken, peaceful, eternal in rhythm. You might let your thoughts drift there now, where air is cool, scent is soft, and rest arrives without asking. The night, as it once was, remains kind to those who prepare for peace. When morning arrived after a restless night, silence rarely lasted long. People gathered in corners of kitchens or beside the fading hearth, rubbing sleep from their eyes as the day's first light crept across the floor. And then, gently, one voice would begin. Someone would speak of a strange dream, or of waking suddenly in the dark. heart pounding for reasons they couldn't name. The others listened quietly, stirring warm drinks, nodding slowly. There was no judgment in these conversations, only understanding. They knew that dreams, fears, and whispers of the night were part of being human, and in sharing them, the fear seemed to lose its edge. Words, soft and careful, became a way to bring light to what once felt heavy. That was the true power of telling. To speak of a nightmare was to step out of it. When someone put their dream into words, it stopped belonging to the dark and began to belong to the day. It was no longer something that controlled them, but something they could hold, describe, and release. The act itself was quiet therapy, though they never called it that. They called it breakfast, or conversation, or simply being together. In those small moments, they unknowingly practiced what we now understand as healing, turning fear into story, and story into peace. Each voice that joined added weight to the comfort, a reminder that no one dreamed alone. Even fear, when shared, became smaller. You can almost hear it, the clink of cups, the murmur of voices, the warmth of morning wrapping gently around the memory of the night. Across cultures, the habit of telling dreams was nearly universal. In villages, in camps, in small stone homes, people told what they saw in sleep. Sometimes they spoke of rivers that ran backward, or of doors that never opened. Sometimes it was simply of faces, familiar, blurred, or lost. The details were strange, but the feeling was always the same: confusion, wonder, or quiet fear. By telling, they translated the language of the mind into the language of life, and that translation mattered. It made the unseen visible, the silent speakable. It made people feel less alone in the fragile hours after waking. Some believed that a nightmare could only harm you if you kept it inside, so the first thing one should do upon waking from something frightening was to speak of it aloud, even to the empty room. This, they thought, scattered the dream like smoke in daylight. Whether true or not, it brought relief. A whispered confession to the morning could be enough to lift a heavy feeling that words had finally set free. It wasn't about magic. It was about release, a practice of turning darkness into sound, and sound into calm. The simple act of speaking eased the mind like water cools fire. The stories were not always frightening. Many were strange, beautiful, or even funny. Children loved to tell their dreams of flying or running endlessly through meadows. Elders told dreams of their youth, of places long gone, of loved ones whose faces returned for a moment in sleep. These tales stitched together the fabric of generations, proof that dreams, even fleeting ones, connected people beyond time. A story told after sleep became a small gift to the day, a reminder that imagination never truly rests. And for those who listened, it was comfort to know that everyone, no matter their age, wandered through strange worlds when they closed their eyes. If you've ever woken from a dream and told someone, you've shared in that same ancient ritual. The telling doesn't just explain, it frees. Some mornings, people gathered outside instead, around fires or in open courtyards. The cold air helped clear their minds as they shared what they'd seen. The smoke from the fire curled upward like a symbol of the night's memories rising and fading. One story would blend into another until the line between dream and memory blurred completely. But it didn't matter. What mattered was the connection, the feeling of being understood, of not carrying the strangeness of the night alone. In this way, stories became medicine, not for the body, but for the spirit, and the telling itself was the cure. Evening and morning, the cycle continued. People fell asleep with worries, dreamed through them, and woke to share what their minds had woven. The more they spoke, the lighter their hearts became. Fear, after all, is strongest in silence. But spoken softly, it begins to dissolve like mist under sunlight. And so, each day began with a kind of gentle exorcism, not of evil, but of unease. Through words, they emptied the mind, preparing it once more for the next night's rest. You can almost feel the balance now, the soft rhythm of night and day, silence and speech, fear and release. It's the same rhythm that lets you rest, knowing that no dream lasts forever. As stories passed from one voice to another, they began to change shape. A frightening dream softened when told in daylight. A sad dream became almost poetic when shared beside the fire. Even the darkest visions lost their sharp edges as they turned into words. And so, people learned that expression itself could transform fear. They didn't have journals or therapy, they had each other. Telling a story became both protection and release. It made the mind lighter, the heart easier to carry. The listeners, too, shared in that calm, because hearing another's fears often reminded them of their own. In silence, people felt alone. In conversation, they remembered that everyone dreamed. Sometimes, these morning stories became lessons. Parents would listen to their children's dreams and draw meaning from them, not to predict fate, but to teach reflection. A dream about being lost might lead to a talk about courage. A dream about falling might remind them to hold steady when life felt uncertain. In this way, dreams became gentle mirrors of the soul. They were not divine messages or prophecies, just quiet reminders of what lived in the heart. Through story, people found wisdom hidden in imagination. Even fear, when named and examined, could become understanding. You can imagine those quiet voices now, not hurried, not loud, just human, soft as the morning itself. The rhythm of storytelling connected generations. Grandparents told tales of what they once dreamed when they were young, and grandchildren listened in awe. A lifetime of sleep turned into a tapestry of strange and beautiful scenes, stitched together by memory. The night, which once felt endless and isolating, became shared ground. It was no longer something to fear, but something to explore together. The act of telling turned isolation into belonging. It wove comfort between people who might otherwise never have spoken deeply. The smallest dream could build the strongest bond. In some places, people even created gatherings just for this purpose, moments before work began, when stories flowed freely. There were no rules, no audience, no judgment, only voices rising and falling like a soft tide. It was the earliest form of group reflection, a reminder that the mind, like the body, needed space to breathe. These moments taught balance between imagination and reality. When shared aloud, the wildest dreams became part of the ordinary world again. And that, perhaps, was the secret of peace, to keep fear where it belongs, as a story, not a shadow. If you've ever felt lighter after telling someone a worry, you already know this truth. Words turn weight into air. As time passed, the art of telling dreams slowly faded. People grew busier, mornings shorter, nights filled with distractions. But somewhere deep within, that instinct remains. We still wake from strange dreams and reach for our phones, our journals, or a friend, trying to name what we felt. Even now, in our own ways, we continue the ancient practice, transforming fear into language, and language into rest. We are not so different from those who spoke beside firelights centuries ago. The world has changed, but the mind still seeks the same relief, the comfort of being understood. There is a gentle wisdom in remembering how easily calm returns once fear is spoken. It teaches us that silence is not always peace. Sometimes it is weight. To whisper, even to oneself, "I was afraid, but it's over now," is an act of letting go. That small sentence carries the same power their stories once did. It acknowledges, releases, and forgives the imagination for being too vivid. And when you do, sleep, the most natural healer of all, comes back softly, without struggle. That is the quiet circle of fear and peace, always turning, always renewing. If you let your thoughts drift now, they will find their way into that same circle. The mind releases, the body softens, and the story ends where calm begins, by the time the sun climbed high and the day was fully awake. Those old storytellers had already forgotten most of what they'd said. The dreams faded, the fear forgotten, the peace remained. And when night came again, they were ready to dream once more, not afraid, but curious. For they knew now that every shadow of sleep would one day become a story told in morning light. And so they rested, trusting that even their fears could become gentle if given a voice. The night breathed out, the day breathed in, and life continued in the rhythm of telling and being heard. And through it all, calm endured, carried by words, by time, and by the simple act of sharing. As centuries passed, curiosity began to replace fear. The same dreams that once inspired silence now invited questions. People started to wonder what truly happened in the mind when the eyes closed. The night had not changed, but humanity's way of seeing it had. No longer a battlefield of spirits or shadows, it became a landscape of thought, emotion, and memory. Science was still young, still whispering, still uncertain, but it began to offer a new kind of comfort, understanding. The fear of nightmares slowly shifted into fascination with the mind itself, as though humanity had turned a candle toward its own reflection. And in that quiet light, the mystery of sleep grew deeper, not darker. Those early thinkers didn't have modern tools, but they had patience. They observed, they recorded, and they compared. One noted that people who were troubled often dreamed of storms or falling. Another wrote that calm souls slept deeply, their dreams gentle and fleeting. These were not experiments of machines or numbers, they were studies of feeling, careful notes written beside candlelight. They were trying to map something invisible, the human inner world. Each page of their work was both science and poetry, a slow step toward understanding the most natural mystery of all rest. You can imagine that moment, the quiet scratch of a quill, the hum of thought in a world without noise, the beginning of knowledge born from wonder. Some believed that dreams were echoes of memory, small pieces of the day rearranged in the mind. To them, sleep was like a mirror, showing reflections in strange and shifting order. Others thought that dreams were the language of emotion, not symbols from beyond, but from within. That idea was revolutionary. It suggested that fear, love, and longing had a home inside the self, not in the world outside. And once that idea took root, the darkness of night began to feel less threatening. It wasn't haunted, it was human. The unknown no longer needed protection, charms, or whispered rituals. It only needed curiosity, the courage to ask, why do we dream at all? The whispers of science did not erase mystery, they deepened it. For every explanation found, new questions appeared. Why does the mind replay memories while resting? Why do some dreams soothe us while others wake us trembling? Even as they learned more, people still felt that dreams carried meaning beyond words. And so, the balance remained. Reason on one side, wonder on the other. The night was no longer feared, but it was never fully understood either. It became something sacred in its own quiet way, not divine, but deeply human. Understanding doesn't destroy awe, it refines it. Even now, knowing how the body sleeps does not make the experience less magical. Those early scholars treated sleep as a living mystery. They believed it connected the physical and the spiritual, though they never claimed to know how. Some saw it as a kind of nightly renewal, a time when the heart and mind were gently They wrote about how rest could heal sorrow, how calm nights led to kind mornings. Their words, though simple, echoed truth, that sleep is not an escape but a form of mercy. It restores what the day unravels, and perhaps that was what made their work timeless. They studied dreams, but what they truly sought was peace. Slowly, old fears began to fade from daily life. People stopped fearing sleep as something dangerous. Instead, they began to see it as natural, necessary, and kind. The idea that nightmares could harm began to lose its hold. They were no longer curses, but signals, the mind's way of processing what the heart couldn't say aloud. This shift changed how people lived. Rest became part of health, not just habit, and the act of sleeping, once protected by charms and rituals, became guided by understanding and trust. You might feel that same trust now, the quiet assurance that rest, when allowed, brings peace without needing to be explained. As science grew, so did humility. For every answer discovered, scholars found 100 new mysteries. They learned how the body moved through stages of sleep, how dreams rose and fell like tides, and how memory shaped what we saw in them. Yet, even with all their notes and reasoning, something remained untouchable. There was still wonder in waking from a dream and not knowing why it felt so real. Still beauty in drifting between consciousness and surrender. The more they learned, the more they realized the mystery was part of the gift. The transformation was slow but gentle. People who once feared sleep began to look forward to it. Night, once filled with imagined dangers, became a time of reflection, of comfort, of restoration. And though not everyone understood the new ideas, the collective feeling of humanity shifted. Darkness lost its threat. The bed became a sanctuary, not a battleground. The mind, once suspected of conjuring spirits, was finally seen for what it was, a garden of thought, tended by rest and quiet mercy. As your eyes grow heavier, remember this. Curiosity replaced fear, and understanding gave birth to calm. What was once frightening became beautiful, simply because someone dared to listen to the quiet within. As knowledge expanded, so too did compassion. Those who studied sleep began to understand that nightmares were not punishments or omens, but reflections of the human condition. They saw that fear itself could take shape in dreams, that what was hidden in the heart sometimes spoke through the language of sleep. This revelation changed how people treated one another. Instead of shame, there was empathy. Instead of silence, there was care. To suffer through sleepless nights was no longer weakness. It was simply part of being alive. And in this new light, sleep was no longer something to fear. It was something to cherish, protect, and respect. Rest was not a mystery to be solved, but a mercy to be received. Those early scientists were often poets without realizing it. They didn't just measure or record, they wondered. They wrote of dreams as colors of the mind, as soft reflections of thought and memory. They noticed that the same patterns of sleep existed in every culture, in every person, in every place touched by night. This connection humbled them. It meant that beneath all differences, language, belief, and time, people were united by the same rhythm, the need to close their eyes and rest. Sleep was the quiet thread tying humanity together. and understanding it was like learning a shared heartbeat. You might feel that same shared rhythm now, billions of hearts across time, breathing softly together beneath the same sky. As the science of sleep evolved, fear retreated into the background. Doctors began to speak of rest as medicine, of dreams as the mind's natural cleansing. They realized that when the body was calm, the mind could heal itself, and when the mind was healed, life felt lighter. In time, the night lost its reputation for danger and became a symbol of balance. Darkness was no longer the opposite of light, it was its companion, necessary for growth, reflection, and renewal. Through study, people rediscovered what their ancestors had always known, that rest was not idleness but purpose. To sleep was to restore, not to escape. Some thinkers described dreams as the echo of learning, the mind reorganizing what it had gathered during the day. They saw sleep as memory's craftsman, reshaping experiences into understanding. Others noticed that creativity often blossomed from dreams, that great ideas arrived in the quiet hours when reason rested. Even today, the link remains. Peace allows creation. Rest allows renewal. The night became not a void, but a space of quiet building. It was the unseen workshop of the heart and mind, shaping the next day before dawn arrived. The more we learned, the more the mystery deepened, not with fear, but with awe. It's comforting to know that even knowledge can be gentle, that learning about the night only makes it feel more human, not less. When scholars wrote about sleep, their words carried more than observation. They carried tenderness. They described how rest softened the body, how slow breathing mirrored the rhythm of the earth. They saw sleep as an act of balance, where every living thing paused to return to harmony. Their studies were quiet forms of gratitude, acknowledging the mercy built into life's design. They began to teach others how to honor this rhythm, to sleep when tired, to wake with the sun, to let the night do its quiet work. Through them, knowledge became a kind of peace. Understanding did not remove wonder, it expanded it. By the time the modern age began, the fear of nightmares had nearly faded. There were still bad dreams, still restless nights, but they no longer carried the same shadow. People had learned to separate the feeling of fear from the belief in danger. A nightmare was simply a reflection, a signal from within, a story written by the mind's own hand. And when daylight returned, so did balance. The world outside the window remained the same. Only understanding had changed. And in that change, fear lost its power. You might feel the same gentle realization now, that fear, once named and known, becomes something softer, even kind. Science, at its best, brought humanity back to humility. For all the studies and findings, it could not capture the soul of sleep, that quiet surrender that still feels miraculous. There is still something sacred in closing the eyes and trusting the unseen to carry us safely through the dark. Knowledge did not end mystery, it turned it into gratitude. Every discovery, every theory, every explanation pointed to the same truth, that rest is a mercy gifted to every living being. And the more we understood it, the more we learned to respect it. For in the quiet language of sleep, the mind speaks, the body heals, and peace, the simplest of all sciences, finally begins. Even after centuries of study, dreams remain the most private theater of the mind. Every night, when the world grows quiet, the curtain of sleep rises, and we step into a story that belongs only to us. No director, no audience, no script, just emotion and memory shaping scenes in silence. We might walk through familiar streets, meet faces that feel known but aren't, or witness moments that seem both real and impossible. In this hidden theatre, everything has meaning, though not always logic. And when we wake, the play dissolves like smoke, leaving only fragments of feeling behind. Dreams, it seems, are not about understanding. They are about release. The mind speaking in images when words are no longer enough. Each night, the theatre opens again, quietly, patiently, asking us to listen. Some philosophers once said that dreams are how the mind tells stories to itself. They are our unspoken thoughts, dressed in color and motion. The worries, the hopes, the questions we hide in daylight return at night in disguise. That's why some dreams feel heavy, others peaceful, and some simply strange. In the soft language of sleep, the mind rearranges truth into art. It's as if every person becomes a poet in the dark, weaving meaning out of memory. And though we rarely remember the lines, the emotion stays with us, a reminder that thought never truly rests, even when the body does. In this way, the dream world mirrors the waking one, full of wonder, full of uncertainty, yet always deeply human. You can almost feel that theatre beginning to open, quiet curtains of thought, the dim hum of imagination returning. Dreams often borrow from the smallest moments of the day, a passing sound, a half-forgotten word, a glance, all become pieces of the night's performance. The mind, in its endless creativity, stitches them together into stories no one could write awake. It doesn't care about time or logic. It blends past and present freely, turning seconds into years and memories into futures. When we dream, we live outside of reason, and strangely, that freedom heals us. Because for a few hours, the world makes sense in ways only the heart can understand. Even in the strangest scenes, there's comfort, the quiet reassurance that we can feel, imagine, and wander without fear. The mind's theatre is built from emotion, not detail. That's why we often forget what we dreamed but remember how it felt. The fear of falling, the peace of floating, the warmth of a familiar voice, these linger long after waking. It's as though the soul takes notes in feeling instead of words. This is what makes dreaming universal. Every person, from every century, shares that same stage, shaped by their own life but directed by something deeper, the unseen rhythm of thought. And when the curtain falls with dawn, we carry fragments of those unseen stories into the day, tiny echoes of another world that once felt real. If you start to feel your thoughts drifting, let them. That drifting is the first step into the same gentle theatre they once described. In some ways, the dream world is kinder than waking life. It allows us to face fears without harm, to revisit what's lost, to see beauty that never existed. It's a rehearsal space for the soul, a place to understand without consequence. Some wake in tears, others in calm, yet both have been changed slightly by what they saw. No one leaves their dreams untouched. Every night, we become both actor and audience, both creator and observer. And though the play ends at sunrise, its quiet wisdom lingers. Dreams remind us that imagination is not a luxury, it's a language of being alive. In ancient times, people tried to record their dreams on parchment or stone, but they soon realized how difficult it was. Words couldn't hold the color or emotion of what they'd seen. Dreams slipped away the moment they were touched, like water through fingers. This fleeting nature fascinated them, that something so vivid could vanish so completely. Perhaps that was the lesson all along, that not everything precious is meant to last. Some things, like dreams, exist only to remind us of beauty in impermanence, and then they fade, leaving peace in their absence. Let that thought settle, that even fading can be gentle, that the temporary can be enough. The mind's theatre is endless. Every night it rebuilds itself, unique and unseen, guided by the quiet energy of thought. It takes everything we've felt, loved, or feared, and paints it into patterns we may never remember. And yet, those forgotten dreams still do their work. They soften the mind, smooth sharp edges, prepare us to face another day. Like unseen waves reshaping the shore, they repair what waking life wears away. And when we wake with calmness, even without knowing why, it is often their silent gift. Dreams are not entertainment. They are care offered by the mind to itself. Some thinkers once compared dreams to candlelight, too dim to see the whole room, but bright enough to glimpse truth in fragments. They believed that dreams didn't reveal the future, they revealed perspective. They showed what we feared to face, or what we longed to keep close. The scenes were never random, only symbolic, shaped by the deepest corners of the mind. A river might mean change. A locked door might mean waiting. A shadow might mean something unresolved. Dreams were like gentle teachers, showing the heart what it already knew but hadn't yet said aloud. And though people later called this psychology, it began simply as self-awareness, the oldest kind of wisdom, discovered in silence. Over time, people learned to make peace with their dreams. They stopped searching for messages and started listening for meaning. If a nightmare came, they didn't see it as punishment, but as reflection, a mirror held up to their own fears. If a peaceful dream came, they accepted it as mercy, a moment of rest given freely. In both, they found balance. For even the hardest dreams end with waking, and every sunrise proves that darkness never stays. That pattern itself, of dreaming, fearing, and returning to calm, became the story of the human spirit. It was resilience, told in the language of sleep. You can feel that rhythm in yourself now, fear softening, calm returning, the night gently letting go. Some described dreaming as a form of prayer without words, a state of being where the mind reflected and the soul listened. Not asking, not speaking, only existing in quiet awareness. In those hours, people felt closest to peace, even when the dream was strange or unclear. It reminded them that rest is not just physical but spiritual, a mercy that restores both thought and feeling. Sleep was not empty, it was alive with renewal. And when they awoke, even from restless nights, something in them felt repaired, though they couldn't say how. It was the silent work of rest, unseen, but real. Dreams also reminded people of humility. No matter how wise, no one could control what they saw in sleep. The greatest minds, the simplest workers, all surrendered to the same vast unknown each night. It was an equalizer, soft and honest. In sleep, pride had no place. Every person was returned to their most human form, vulnerable, quiet, and dependent on mercy. And in that state, they remembered gratitude for safety, for warmth, for waking once more to the gift of another morning. Even the act of opening one's eyes again felt like renewal, a subtle miracle too often unnoticed. Let that gratitude touch you now, the ease of breath, the stillness around you, the quiet mercy of simply being able to rest. As knowledge deepened, science confirmed what the soul had always sensed, that sleep heals not just the body but the heart. When we rest, our thoughts untangle, our emotions balance, and our strength returns. The old poets called it the night's forgiveness, though today we might call it recovery. The meaning is the same. Each night offers a small restoration that no medicine can replace. Dreams, whether remembered or forgotten, are part of that healing. They give the mind room to wander, to rebuild, to breathe. And so, sleep remains the oldest form of renewal, a mercy written into every human life. Even those who no longer feared nightmares still felt awe at their mystery. They knew that dreams came without permission, yet often left behind a message of calm. It was as if the heart spoke to itself through symbols no one else could translate. That quiet conversation between the seen and unseen gave meaning to the act of rest. It turned every night into a gentle reminder that stillness is not emptiness, and silence is not absence. Something within always listens, always mends, always returns us to peace. And though we can't name it, we can feel it, a warmth, a calm, a quiet trust that morning will come. You might feel that same quiet trust now, the sense that nothing needs to be solved, only softened. The mind's theatre never truly closes. Even in waking hours, imagination lingers at its edge, shaping how we see and feel. It is proof that life itself is dreamlike, fragile, vivid, and fleeting. But within that fragility lies beauty. That rest and reflection are gifts, not escapes. Dreams remind us to pause, to feel, to let go, and to begin again. They are the night's whisper to the waking soul, saying gently, "You have done enough, now sleep." And so, as darkness folds over the world once more, the theatre lights dim, the curtains fall, and peace, patient and familiar, takes the stage. When the stories fade and the mind begins to empty, what remains is silence. Not the hollow kind, but the living kind, full, soft, and steady. It hums beneath everything, even the faintest breath. This silence is older than language, older than fear. It is the space that follows understanding, the pause that lets peace settle. In this quiet, there is no need to chase meaning anymore. The questions have all gone to sleep. Only calm remains calm, that asks for nothing but presence. This is the soft silence after the one humanity has shared for as long as it has dreamed. And in that stillness, the story finally exhales. The old world understood silence differently than we do now. To them, it was not absence, but comfort, the proof that life had slowed enough to listen. After a long day of work or a night of restless thoughts, people sat in quiet together, sometimes without speaking for hours. They didn't find that strange. They found it sacred. Silence was their way of letting the world settle back into order. It allowed the heart to match the rhythm of the air, to rest after feeling too much. In that stillness, they felt close to mercy, not in grand words, but in the simple act of being calm. They knew that peace never shouted, it whispered. You can hear that same whisper now, not outside, but within, where the noise of thought begins to soften. Every home had its version of silence. Some filled it with faint sounds, the ticking of wood cooling after fire, the breathing of a sleeping child, the sigh of wind against the shutters. Others filled it with prayer, soft and private, spoken more with the heart than the tongue. Silence was not empty space. It was the gentle fabric that held life together. It reminded them that not every moment needed a voice, not every thought needed a name. Through silence, they met themselves again, without hurry, without judgment. And when they finally lay down to sleep, the silence followed them, wrapping around the room like a second blanket. As centuries passed, the world grew louder. Markets, machines, and modern life began to fill the hours that once belonged to quiet. Yet even now, the need for silence remains. Our bodies remember it, our hearts crave it. It's the sound of balance, the proof that we are still capable of rest. In the deepest part of night, when the world slows and the lights fade, that ancient silence still waits for us. It has never left. It simply waits for us to remember how to listen. And when we do, peace arrives without effort. You don't have to force stillness. It finds you naturally when you stop trying to fill the space. The silence after understanding feels different. It's not the silence of loneliness, but of fullness, the kind that comes when nothing else needs to be said. When you've faced your thoughts, felt your fears, and told your stories, there is a quiet that settles beneath it all. That quiet is not the end. It is the reward. It is what remains when the noise of worry fades and gratitude begins to bloom. In it, you realize how much of life can exist without words. How much peace is possible when we simply allow ourselves to rest. The night becomes a companion again, not an adversary. Some nights, people of old would sit by dying fires, watching the last ember glow and fade. They wouldn't speak, they would just watch, their faces lit by faint orange light, breathing in unison with the dimming flame. That moment, the one just before darkness, was their favorite, because in that instant, the world felt whole. There was nothing to fix, nothing to seek, nothing to fear. The fire's final breath mirrored their own quiet, natural, peaceful, and as it disappeared, they felt ready to sleep, carried by the same rhythm of surrender that guided the flame back into night. You might feel that rhythm now, the slow exhale, the gentle dimming, the body ready to let go. The beauty of silence is that it does not end. It simply deepens. Even as we drift into sleep, silence travels with us, softening thought into dream and dream into peace. It is the thread that ties waking to rest, day to night, life to renewal. It holds everything together in stillness, and though it asks for nothing, it gives everything calm, breath, and the sense that we are small but cared for. That is the gift hidden inside the quiet, the reassurance that we were never alone in the dark, only accompanied by peace we forgot how to hear. When people finally closed their eyes, the silence outside seemed to echo within them. It was as if the world and the heart had agreed to rest together. The pulse slowed, the breath deepened, and even thought grew drowsy. There was no need to fight sleep anymore. It arrived like an old friend coming through an open door. The walls held their warmth, the air grew softer, and time itself loosened its grip. This was the peace they had worked toward all day, a quiet earned through effort and humility. Sleep wasn't escape, it was reward, and when it came, it felt less like falling and more like being carried. They believed that silence carried healing. Even in darkness, it whispered renewal into weary minds. Rest was not just for the body, but for the heart that had felt too much, and the mind that had wandered too far. To sleep was to return home to oneself, and though they never spoke it aloud, there was gratitude woven into their stillness, a silent thank you for safety, warmth, and one more night of peace. The silence after understanding became a kind of prayer, wordless, effortless, but deeply sincere. It was the sound of being content. You might feel that same contentment now, the stillness beneath your thoughts, the calm that waits quietly beneath every breath. Each generation carried this wisdom in its own way. They passed it down not through books, but through rhythm, through how they spoke, how they paused, how they prepared for rest. The practice of calm became an inheritance. You can almost feel it in your own heartbeat, in the stillness of your room, in the softness of the air around you. It's the same peace that filled cottages, temples, tents, and homes long ago, proof that calmness never belonged to any one place. It's part of being human. The silence that heals the past still waits for us now, unchanged by centuries, ready whenever we remember to listen. When dawn began to whisper through the shutters, the silence shifted again. It didn't end. It transformed. Birdsong began to rise in small threads of sound, weaving softly into the air. The world was waking, but it did so gently, careful not to disturb the calm that night had built. And in that slow transition, people found something sacred, the reminder that every ending can also be a beginning. The silence that closed one night became the breath that opened another day. That rhythm was eternal. Inhale, exhale, light, dark, waking, sleep, each giving meaning to the other. If you feel yourself drifting, let it happen. You're part of that same rhythm now, carried by time, by peace, by something older and kinder than thought. Silence, in the end, is not emptiness. It is the space where gratitude lives. Every calm breath is a quiet thank you for life, for rest, for the chance to begin again tomorrow. And when the mind grows quiet enough, it can hear that gratitude speaking back. A gentle assurance that peace is never gone, only waiting. This is the soft silence after not an ending, but a continuation, a pause that hums softly between heartbeats. It's the place where stories end and dreams begin, and tonight it belongs to you. As the world turns slowly toward morning, the silence around you becomes softer still. The words of this story fade until they're no longer needed. All that remains is rhythm, the sound of your breathing, the hush of the night, the steady comfort of being safe and still. You've traveled through history, through fear and understanding, through the tender spaces between them. Now, all that remains is rest. Let the quiet take its place. Let it hold you the way the night once held all who came before, gently, patiently, endlessly, endlessly. If you're still awake, there's no hurry. Sleep comes the way dawn does, slow, certain, and full of light, waiting behind the dark. So now, as this story fades into the distance, take a deep breath. You've listened, wandered, and rested beside voices from centuries past. Their fears, their hopes, and their calm have all found you here, in this moment. And though their world has vanished, the peace they sought still exists within you. Let it stay with you tonight, and for many nights to come. The soft silence after is yours. Closing pause, warm tone. If you've enjoyed this quiet journey through history, I invite you to subscribe and return next time. There's always another forgotten story waiting for you, a whisper from the past to guide your sleep. Next time, we'll wander deeper into the shadows of old belief, to ask softly, why did people believe the night was dangerous? Until then, rest well, dream kindly, and good night.